All right, morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone today. Hopefully, everyone is making out okay despite it being relatively raining, drizzling. I'm not entirely sure what exactly we would call what's happening outside. Not exactly the most fantastic thing we've ever run into. I'd like to welcome you to our fourth annual. It's kind of amazing to think of it now, having been 4 years that we've been doing this. Our fourth annual Social Science Interdisciplinary Consortium Conference, also acronamed SSICC. SSICC was founded in 2020 with the acronym being kind of, well, let's say appropriate for the time. And a little tongue-in-cheek given my generation and people calling things sick. So, you know, we're less sick now, but we're still very sick in the 90s. Form of talking about things. But that's enough really lazy dad humor for me. I am Dr. Isaiah Cohen. I am from the sociology wing of the Department of Anthropology and Sociology here at USD. And before we kind of get ourselves too much further, because we've got an excellent slate of presenters for our first session this morning, I want to make sure that provide thanks to my fellow members within the department who worked together with me in one capacity or another to get this conference going, as well as our excellent undergraduate students who also provided some insight along the way. I'd also like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences for helping to promote this conference, as well as the sheer breadth of disciplines that have lended their students and their faculty to us for this conference today. I'm very much looking forward to being able to hear from disciplines ranging from the School of Education, obviously the College of Arts and Sciences, out to the School of Nursing. Rather wide range of disciplines, and that's just kind of the beginning. So our first group of sessions today, we'll have people presenting on mental health, education, and society. I know I kind of reserved 10 minutes to talk, but I always hate talking more than necessary. And since I have some current students in the room, they also hate having to listen to me more than is necessary, which I understand. And I know that I have some people who need to be able to get out of here pretty quick. So I'm actually going to flip things over to my first presenting group who will be speaking to the conference about the school to prison pipeline.
Nick, okay, so I'm doing this. Okay. Hi, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Alyssa.
Our project is on the school to prison pipeline. So what is the school to prison pipeline? The school to prison pipeline is the process of underprivileged juveniles, youth, often racial minorities in the United States, facing a high incarceration rate after or during their primary education as a result of strict school policies. And some causes are, of course, strict school policies, lack of student resources, long school hours, bullying, systemic racism, and economic hardship. And on that pie chart up there is on some statistics in Oklahoma. About 15% of African-American students and 7.3% of Latino students are disciplined with out-of-school suspension compared to 4.7% of white students. And the main targets of the student to prison pipeline are those with troubled histories, those with disabilities in regards to behavior, and children of color. And from children of color, Black children are the largest group targeted. Why? Zero tolerance discipline has caused Black students facing disproportionately harsher punishments than white students. And what is zero tolerance? Zero tolerance are policies that require schools to be suspended or expel students for violating school rules regardless of circumstances. This can result in a long-term or permanent departure from education, which will negatively impact the student's success. And some national statistics given by the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, is 50% of white students and 16% of Black students are enrolled in public schools. Black students represent 31% of school-related arrests, and Black students are suspended and expelled 3 times more than white students. And finally, students who are expelled for a discretionary violation are nearly 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system the following year.
All right, so what are some risk factors of the school to prison pipeline? So students who live in poverty or live in disorganized communities, some poor academic performance, substance misuse, gang membership, weak social ties, broken homes, and antisocial behavior. So what does the school to prison pipeline do to our students' mental health? So during early education, the pipeline begins to cast doubt into the minds of young men in the form of hopelessness, worthlessness, and symptoms of depression. Compared to other African-American men, those who've been incarcerated have 14%, 13%, and 16% higher severity of depression, distress, and discrimination. The most terrifying part about the school to prison pipeline is that it can happen anywhere, anytime, and it can affect as many male students or female students as we allow it to. So what are some things that we can do to try and avoid this idea of the school to prison pipeline? First, we should reduce classroom size. This is one of the biggest contributors to the school to prison pipeline, as when students act out, they are often suspended or expelled, and teachers can only be expected to control so many children. In truth, class size is one of the most single effective ways to improve outcomes for children. So we shouldn't be surprised when a class of 38 or more students that there's going to be students who are acting out. So this can take so many forms, from violence or to pull away socially. And by minimizing our class size, we can allow our teachers to really focus on our students to help them to try and act out less. So another way we can minimize the school to prison pipeline is by increasing social workers or mental health professionals in our school system. So in lots of schools that struggle with poverty and mental health issues, we basically treat the juvenile criminal system as a mental health facility for the poor. What this means is that kids and students who need special services are usually shut down and ignored and sent into the school to prison pipeline. So by increasing social workers and mental health professionals, it can help us make sure that our students are taken care of in the school. So the last thing we can do is, as talked about before, the strict school policies. So most schools have a zero tolerance policy, and we should try and replace that with restorative justice. A restorative justice program is something that allows educators to understand the underlying causes of the disruptive misbehavior and attempt to repair the damage and help build a sense of community. So instead of saying, oh, you did something wrong, you need to be punished, it should take the approach that all parties involved are people, and that when infractions occur, there are responsible parties, and a part of the perpetrator's responsibility is now to help restore whatever was lost by the infraction. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to invite our next esteemed presenter up here in just a moment, once I get their presentation up. I'd like to invite Sam Goldsmith up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Goldsmith. I'm currently a social studies teacher at Laverne High School in Laverne, Minnesota. It's in the southwest corner of the state. Prior to that, I was a teacher at Worthington High School in Worthington, Minnesota for 28 years. I'm not sure how to advance to the next slide. It's a little different than what I'm used to. It's okay. I'm sure it's just, I'm not super good with technology. And so what do I do now? It should be. Oh, that. Okay, great. All right. So the screen you're looking at gives you some of my background. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because as a veteran high school teacher in public schools, I'm constantly looking for ways to engage my students and to encourage them to use their voice. So in my classroom, it's not unusual to have 30 kids. Sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 20. But oftentimes, the larger the class, I found that students are reluctant to participate and they're reluctant to share their opinion. So I've been searching for ways to encourage them to take ownership of their position, how they feel about a certain topic. So I want to share with you a strategy that I found to be very effective. I need to tell you, I've only used it in high schools until Monday. I used it with a bunch of educators out in Rapid City when I attended a conference there and presented on the strategy. And I found it to work really well with adults too. I'm also showing you this because it gives you some insight into who I am as an individual and my desire to keep growing as a human. I have a lot of parts to my personality, and as an educator, I also try to draw those parts out of my students. I am divorced, single parent, and remarried again, 2 kids, one of whom's in college. I'm a runner. We just took up cross-country skiing. I'm trying to parent a freshman in college. There's a lot going on in my life. And my classroom represents that because I'm always looking for new ways to reinvigorate my approach to teaching students. This quote, I think, really does a wonderful job of explaining the value of the silent discussion because it brings voices out of anyone, but especially those who are usually the ones who don't raise their hand in class and are maybe nervous to participate. So the silent discussion, the format is there is a primary source or there's something printed on paper, and then students contribute to it one at a time. They are not allowed to talk to one another. There's no cell phones allowed. I typically have them use a variety of different colored pens or pencils, and I did not create this. I stole this from another person, and I just want to make sure you understand that so you don't think that this is my own creation. But that's the beauty of teaching and the beauty of education. It's okay to share and to take from one another to make your learning space even better than it was the day before. So I've used the silent discussion primarily in my history classes, and I've primarily used it as a review tool. And so I'm going to show you some examples, and I'll walk you through it in case you're just listening. But what I have done in my history classes is we use a lot of primary sources. And so review day is let's go through other primary sources that are of the same topic, and then I want to see formative assessment. Did they understand what the lesson was about, what the unit was about? Did they make the connections I was hoping they would? So I could choose an excerpt from a speech. I could choose a graph. I could choose a painting. It's wide open. It's whatever's going to work best for your classroom, for your students, for whatever it is that you're studying. The reason I really appreciate this approach is it allows a dialogue between students without talking. They are encouraged to ask questions, and if someone else knows the answer, they're encouraged to answer. It's a safe way to say, I don't know. It's a safe way to say, well, I do know, without coming across maybe in a fashion that might be offensive to other students. So when I've done this in class, I usually allow 2 minutes at each station or at their desk as papers get passed around. But that depends on the needs of your classroom, the time frame that you have. I just did this activity yesterday as an introduction in my senior geography class, and I gave them 30 seconds a card. So I'm going to show you some examples that I've used. I'm going to step away from the microphone and I'll talk really loudly. I promise. I've got a good teacher voice. So in my US history class is a review of our first unit, Colonial America. We studied John Winthrop's City Upon a Hill. So on this sheet is an excerpt from that speech. I glued it onto a piece of cardboard paper, and then I had it on a table in our media center, and I had other documents I'll show you in just a moment. I gave students one at a time, because they would rotate between the stations, 2 minutes to read this, and then make a comment. Circle something they didn't understand. Ask a question. Another one of the documents that they had access to for our review was this primary source. It's a picture of the origins of the African slave trade. And I know it's hard to see from where everyone is sitting or viewing this, but kids have actually circled images on this and then made an error to ask a question about it or say, this reminds me of something we saw in class. Another primary source I used was this picture, and it's from Colonial America. It's a woman who's spinning cotton, and the students have a lot of questions. So I would display these either on different tables in our media center, or students would sit at their own desk and then rotate papers, primary sources every 2 or 3 minutes. It just depends on the space you have and the best way to organize your students. Now, one time I did do this with a group of 30 and the kids worked in pairs, and that did not work very well because they want to talk, they want to share. And also my son was in that class and he made every effort to make my teaching experience not my best that year. So I would recommend not using pairs, but you know your students better than I do. So what I have found in looking at these after we did this, and after they got to go back and look at all the comments that were made at all the cards, is I realized there were some holes in my teaching of this first unit. I thought I had covered this speech really well, but when the kids went back to it, they had lots of questions. Now I could be angry about that and say, well, I did my job and why didn't, but the reality is what I wanted them to know clearly did not come across. So it's not only beneficial for the students to review, it's beneficial for me because I want to create an assessment that matches what I have been trying to teach them and the information that they know. So if you choose to use this, make sure that after they've gone through all the documents, they are allowed to go back through them a second time and look to see, did somebody answer my question? What else do people have to say? That's the part they really enjoy. You'll also find out that after about 3 or 4 rotations, they need a little more time because they want to read all the comments. They want to see what everyone else wrote. And sometimes students say, well, that's cheating because somebody might have written down the right answer. And I say, well, good, then you know what it is. Or how do you know that's the right answer? If you know it's the right answer, then obviously you know what you need to know. I also shared with you that I did this in Rapid City on Monday with teachers, and we used some statements from Ways to Be the Most Effective Teacher. And we pass those around, and I know it's hard for everyone to see, but it was fun to see peers, people just like me, discussing the realities of education and theories behind it. I'm going to step away from the microphone. So you'll see they would look at certain words. They would draw arrows. They would make a comment, and other people would comment on it. I also shared with you that I just did this yesterday with my geography students. I wanted to get an idea of where they were with their knowledge of world religions. These are seniors in high school. They've already had geography as an 8th grade student, and they've had world history. In my mind, they should have a lot of information about world religions. I found out they didn't. And that's okay, because now I know where to begin my lesson. I'm going to step away from the microphone and just show you some of the images that I shared. So I had 26 different images reflecting different world religions, and I felt these images should have been understood by all my students. 2 kids understood that this was a mosque. Clearly, we're going to cover that topic. This is a map of the world represented by different colors that show the concentration of different religions around the globe. They sort of understood that principle. They struggled with reading maps and learning, but they were able to check the colors and were pleased to see
I guess, that everyone in South America is Catholic. So this is a really good opportunity for me to review maps and what generalized maps are. Unfortunately, not a single student knew who this person was, and I was pretty sure that a few kids would get this. But that tells me now I know what I need to teach in this class. Most kids knew who this was. And so I guess now I know I can put emphasis in one area instead of another. And only a few kids were able to identify this picture. So as an introduction activity, the silent discussion can give the teacher
Good information about where we are and where we need to head. So I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you can think of ways to incorporate this into your own classroom, and just realize the impact that it can have, including all voices, all students to participate. Thank you.
That was incredibly interesting. Thank you, Sam. Okay, next up, we will, I believe next presentation actually needs to bring their presentation up, and we'll get that situated. Just give me a quick second. No worries.
Where can I?
No, listen. Oh, it's all good.
Yes.
Screen share.
All good. Awesome.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Shanice Hall. I am currently a doctoral student in the School of Education in the program Educational Leadership and Administration. I have my bachelor's in communication studies from Louisiana State University. I got a thumbs up from Dr. Cohen. And I completed my master's in communications here from the University of South Dakota. I am an international student, one of many international students that made a decision to pursue and further their education in a foreign country. And I will be doing for my dissertation, I'm going to be doing a 3-study manuscript, where today I want to showcase a pilot of my first study titled Support a Speech Code for International Student. And I'll give you guys a good overview of what that is, what that'll entail, and as far as some limitation from the pilot that I hope to overcome later on when I complete this in my dissertation. And it's not working. Oh. Figured it out. Okay. So just as far as our background, as you all know, and you probably realize, our world is becoming increasingly globalized. And international students like myself, many of us are making the decision to further our education in a foreign country. For reference, and this was information collected from Open Doors, which is an annual survey conducted by the Institute of International Education. In 2018 to 2019, they reported 1.1 million international students being enrolled in college campuses. And again, that is within higher education. From 2020 to 2021, there was a slight decrease to 914,095 international students. And this was credited to COVID-19 pandemic that caused a lot of tension and restrictions as far as travel purposes. But from 2021 to 2022, which is the most recent annual survey, they recognize a 4.6 increase of 948,519. So again, though the COVID-19 pandemic did cause a slight decrease, we're able to see that the numbers are continue to increase, and it's projected that for 2022 to 2023, the projection will continue to be on the rise. And this increase in prominence of international students on college campuses is recognized in the academic literature, but the lenses that are taken when they're discussing international students are in three areas. One is the economic benefits that they bring to the United States. And studies have confirmed that it brings over $12 million in revenue annually. And that comes from tuition fees, flights, and living expenses when they're here in the United States. The second thing that is recognized is the institutional benefits that they bring to college campuses. So ideas of multicultural interaction and diversity on campuses and in classrooms are prominently referenced in the literature. And one of the most significant angles that is investigated and highly documented is the struggles and challenges that they face when they move to a foreign country. So you might hear conversations as far as homesickness, culture shock, language barrier being one of the main things, and difficulties forming friendship because of those language barriers. Again, that is very prominent in the literature. But researchers and myself have recognized two areas of opportunity that is lacking when we're talking about international students. That being one, the exploration of these supportive methods don't usually or infrequently uses the voice of these international students. So what this means is they're not directly asking what it is that you need as far as support when you come to these universities. It's more prominent for them to ask, what are your challenges when you're here, instead of what support do you need? So they're lacking their voices as far as what is the support they need. And the second thing is, again, I highlighted the multicultural advantage. So the multicultural advantages that they bring to college campuses is highly recognized, but is very limited when we're having these conversations about support. So again, recognizing these shortcomings and hoping and aiming to overcome these, I am asking the research question. Where did my thing go? Give me 1 second. And that just went the wrong way. So again, recognizing these shortcomings and hoping to overcome them, I am using a unique intercultural framework known as speech code theory to ask the research question, what does support mean for international students? In doing that, I'll be able to overcome those shortcomings by, again, recognizing those two things and bringing voice to those international students, and also highlighting the cultural distinction and meaning of support when, again, we're addressing these things as far as support. So, speech code theory. Many of you might not heard of this theory before. It's an intercultural theory that is very prominent in communication as a discipline. It was created by Gary Phillipson in the 1960s, so it's been around for a very long time. And the overarching notion that Phillipson recognized is that culture strongly impacts communication, and that's going to be verbally and non-verbally. In regards to the premise of the theory, it pretty much states that culture shapes our meanings and our interpretations of words. And these words and phrases are known as speech code. What it means is that each speech code is distinct between cultures. And again, it impacts our meanings of these words, our behaviors when these words are used, and our expectation when these words are phrased. So on this screen right now, you see the word dog, and some of you are just like, what is going on? Why does she have the word dog up there? But when you hear the word dog, I'm sure many of us are thinking about different things. For example, when you hear the word dog, you might be thinking of a pet. And you have your own expectation, cultural expectations of how you should treat a pet. Can your pet sleep in bed with you? Should your pet be eating dog food versus are you supposed to just give your dogs what one would consider the scraps or your leftovers? Another instance is when you think of dog, are you thinking about a friend as far as a best friend, someone that's loyal? Again, just showing the distinction in one word, one speech code. Another example is if you hear the word dog, for example, like myself coming from Jamaica, we think of someone who is a cheater, someone is a player, or someone who is not loyal in a relationship. So again, just demonstrating that one code or one speech code, can mean multiple things. So for my study, I am recognizing the distinct and cultural meaning of codes and using that to further understand what does support mean for international students. So as far as in the methods to do the pilot, I use 3 international students using a convenient sampling here at USD. They consisted of 2 males and 1 female. And in order, once the consent form were gathered from each participant, semi-structured interviews were conducted. It was transcribed, and then a thematical analysis was done using the transcription to identify these patterns to create themes. And from doing that, again, to answer the question, what does support means to international student? 5 themes were gathered based on that thematic analysis. One being support as help, second being support as involvement or inclusion, third being support as patience, the fourth being support as information, and the final one, support as cultural awareness. And while explaining them, I'm just going to pull some quotes that strongly emphasizes these themes. So the first being support as help. Each participant expressed the idea as support being able to get assistance for the specific needs that they had at the time. The most prominent thing that came about in the interviews is the idea of housing, and a lot of the participants felt as though they did not get adequate support because individuals did not actually help them to get the housing accommodation and help them with financial burdens that they were feeling. So a great quote is that so many people want to help me out with so many things. Again, they felt supported because people were actually wanting and willing to help them with the specific needs that they had in place. As far as our next theme, talking about support as involvement, each of the participants praised the clubs, organizations, and local events that were on campus and locally, because it made them feel included and feeling as if they're not only a part of campus, but also a part of the US country, in a sense, if you want to think of that broadly. So the desire for inclusion was also noted in classrooms. Perfect quote right here states that course contents are heavily based on American culture and require a holistic approach where the research professor can do to help them make them feel more included. So again, this idea of inclusion and involvement was not only expressed just in social gatherings, but also they would love to see a little bit of inclusion in the curriculum and content that they're learning in class. They felt like it was just heavily based on American culture. And again, I'm just quoting what our participants say, and they would like to see a more holistic approach that incorporated different cultures across. The third is going to be support as patience, where a lot of the participants express that they wish more patience was granted to them as they are learning to navigate this new environment. The quote here says that you don't even need to learn all the cultures, but just like have patience. This was meant in regards to the language barrier. Again, that's a very prominent experience and a challenge for an international student to overcome and to face. And a lot of them were expressing frustration as far as people expecting them to adjust or assimilate as far as losing their accent. And they would wish that they had a lot more patience while they navigate and learn this environment and be able to communicate as effectively as they can. The fourth being support as information. A lot of the participants mentioned that getting information was one of the important forms of support. One person said that when they got the information, they felt like the person themselves was good and that they actually cared about me. And a quote here said that I figured it out basically from asking people and how they do stuff. And they pretty much stressed that just the idea of asking questions and getting the answers that they were looking for to navigate the system was a great way for them to show that they were supported because they were able to get the information that they needed. Another one of the participants also expressed frustration in regards to the lack of information regarding health insurance. They felt as though they were not supported because they didn't get the adequate information that they need in regards to health insurance. So again, support as information was one of the prominent themes. And then the idea of support as cultural awareness was also very popular across each participant, where they wanted pretty much saying that support is understanding others' culture. So again, not only did the participant express that they tried to learn the customs, or again, just verbatim, trying to understand the American customs and the American values to be able to integrate and have those conversations, but they would have loved to see that reflected in participants and people on campus where they learn their customs and try and integrate that when they're communicating and having conversations with them. So again, these were the 5 themes that pretty much emerge from those transcriptions as far as what they consider to be support. Like I said, again, this was just a pilot study for my dissertation. So there were a few limitations. The biggest one is going to be the participant size or sample size. Again, there was just pilot study, just had 3 participants. So there's going to be a lack of generalization based on that nature, but a future direction that, again, I hope to take as I am moving into conducting this for my first research to my dissertation is that I will use a larger sample size to be able to try and make more generalizable claim about the population. And an update in the research process is also an area of opportunity or recommendation I would make for anyone hoping to duplicate or further in this area. Just because in a lot of these questions, the participants mentioned that they wish they had the interview questions beforehand because they could not recall instances or moments or felt as if they could be able to get better responses just by having that time. So 2 areas, again, is just going to be increasing a larger sample and making sure that I would provide those questions to them beforehand to get more robust responses in a sense. Any questions?
Very, very good and interesting stuff there. Very interested to see personally where your research goes. Okay, our last but certainly not least presentation for the session is going to be, make sure that I provide ability for them to share by Dr. Hale and Mr. Ahmed. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can.
Let me make sure that I increase the volume just a little bit so everyone here can hear us. Okay, you should have the ability to share because I think initially I had everyone locked out, so you should be able to share now.
Right. Dr. Hale and I wish to present an idea for a study that we want to do, a pilot study, based on the ultramarathon runner figure David Goggins and the motivation that he has provided through his talks, his interviews, and the books he's written about his life experiences, his experience in the Navy SEALs, the transformation that he has gone through, and how this self-affirmative talk habit that he incorporated into his daily routine, and to any time he went through a difficult task, this would be his go-to strategy to help himself stay on track and to not give in to ruminative self-talk. So the idea is, does this self-affirmative talk, can it apply to other people as well? Can this be a sort of virtual mentorship that other people can take on in their lives? So the purpose of our study is to see David Goggins, who's a real-life testament to the power of transforming self-talk from a source of neurosis to a source of strength. Whereas before, he used to tell himself when he was about 300 pounds and he felt that he was in a dead-end job and his life wasn't going anywhere, how he was able to transform himself through the self-talk into the person that he is today. And he's run many ultra marathons. He's the only Navy SEAL to have done 3 Hell Weeks. And so the idea is imposter syndrome. Of course, when he first joined the Navy SEAL, he was also suffering from that. Are we able to transform and change that such that our participants also take on that ability in their lives and see that change. So the idea is for our participants to have a kind of routine that they go through in their day, morning routine and an evening routine. The morning routine starts with a scale that they fill. It's based on a motivation app called Dailyo, where they're going to put in how they're feeling today in the morning, put in how they're feeling, what their goals are for the day. These are self-assigned goals by our participants that they want to achieve progress in, what tasks they're going to do to get those goals done. That will take them about 50 seconds or so to fill on the entry app. And then they're going to watch a YouTube short that we're going to provide to them. So that's going to be an email-based system. They're going to get the YouTube video. And then at the end of the day, they're going to fill in another entry on Dailyo, same structure as it is. But we have 4 important questions that we'd like to add for them to incorporate a journal-based system also in our study, which would be something positive, something negative that they've gone through in the day, 1 sentence for each, something that they're grateful about, and finally, something recording their progress throughout the day and the goal that they assigned to themselves for that month. Now, our study is going to take place over 2 months. So the first month is going to be them just doing the Dailyo morning entry and the evening entry on that motivation app. And then the second month, we're going to incorporate the David Goggins video that they can then see. We can see how that changed their day. Are they getting that source of motivation, or and how it's affecting their day? So through our literature review, we looked at other motivation apps and how they're affecting the people who use them, and we got the impression from the 2 studies that we looked up that individuals desire more information on how to actually improve their mood rather than just tracking it. So this is also one of the gaps that we hope to fill in with our study. And the second is that the weekly or monthly summaries can be difficult to understand and can be improved by providing insights about what affects mood, right? So there's an element also here at the beginning of our study that we're going to incorporate, which is psychoeducation. So we want our participants to recognize what is it that is causing them neurosis throughout the day. So we're going to have a talk with them about cognitive errors. And at the beginning of the study and at the very end of the study, we're also going to have them fill in. This is the part here that we want to talk about: the pre and post study standard Big 5 personality inventory. So that way we're also controlling for personality. The 2 dimensions of the Big 5 theory that we're most interested in are conscientiousness and neuroticism. Neuroticism, of course, encompasses both anxiety and depression. So we want to see how those 2 are going to be affected at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study, because our hypothesis doesn't just concern or expect or predict an improvement in mood over the course of the study, but also hopefully at the end of the study, we're going to see a change in the personality dimension. Obviously not a significant change. This is only 2 months period, but hopefully if this pilot study is successful, we can then replicate it on a grander scale, replicate it for perhaps a period of 6 months, 1 semester, or for a period of an entire school year, and see how that can affect change. The reason also we chose freshmen is that they are ones who are most likely to be confronted with imposter syndrome. They're in a new environment. They went from their small school to the much larger college environment. Suddenly the competence hierarchy that they're in is much more vertical, and so that can cause them to have a lot of neurosis, to not be sure how well they're performing, and to have a distorted view of themselves throughout the semester that can really impact their procrastination, their study habits, and their productivity throughout the day. So our study implements a way to improve mood while making more sense of the meaning of the data given. Therefore, we fill those 2 gaps that were of particular interest to the 2 studies that we looked up on this. One was done by Schuler et al. In 2021 about understanding people's use of and perspective on mood tracking apps. And the other was done by Baumel et al. In 2019, and he looked at the objective user engagement with mental health apps, and he noticed that in just 2 weeks, only 6% of people who installed the motivation app they were using actually kept using them. The mood tracking apps don't have that high of a retention rate, mostly because they have the novelty bias. People are interested in trying them out. There's something new. They install them on their phones, but then they don't know how to use them. They don't know how they're going to improve their lives. It just feels like a hassle, so they uninstall them. So hopefully our expectation and our hypothesis is that when they pick an activity of their choosing, the goal that they want to improve every day and the activity that was going to significantly contribute to that goal being accomplished, that will be something self-assigned. So this is not something imposed on the participants, but rather something chosen by the participants. And that can be something as learning a new language, increasing the number of hours that they study a day, going to the gym, picking up a new study habit, joining a new group or a club that they want to join, any kind of habit or they want to pick up a positive habit. And we hopefully what we want to do is help them every day in the morning, give them a reminder, if you will, of why it is that they're doing what they're doing, to always keep them on track. That's also why we thought the idea of them getting it once they wake up would be much better than just having it something throughout the day. So we incorporate it as part of the morning routine. And also in our future directions for our study, we'd also like to study different types of morning routines. So it's not just a less than 1 minute David Goggins video that we're going to send them in an email every morning, but also what if we did something different? What if it was an exercise routine that they went through, like a 2-minute exercise routine or a 3-minute exercise routine? When it could be something as a meditative exercise. What other morning routines can we incorporate into different studies and compare between participants that can lead to them being able to have throughout the day improved mood and an increased sense of self-confidence that can counter the neurosis. And finally, we're going to compare our results in a pre-post intervention repeated measures design and see the difference between those two months. The idea here that we're looking over again and again is virtual mentorship, encouraging self-talk as an antidote to neurosis. So over the past several years, we've seen a change, a real change for a lot of young people using Dr. James Pennebaker's famous study about past authoring, where he'd have participants journal about what he called mini PTSDs, mini traumas that participants went through. And the way he measured that was if you had an traumatic event that stayed with you for over a year and a half and you're still ruminating on it, then that would be considered a traumatic event. So he said, well, what if we set participants down and had them just write about it, just work through it on paper? And in the short term, that caused them a lot of stress, but in the medium to long term, they improved significantly, and even their physical and biological markers improved such that they had less visits to physicians throughout the period of study and afterwards because of the idea of writing down one's thoughts and recording them in that way. And that will be the journal-based element in our study that we incorporate at the end of the day. And we wanted to keep it simple. We want to always minimize participant burden. So that's why we're keeping it to just 4 questions: something positive, something negative, something you're grateful about, and what progress you've made today towards your goal. And we also want to make sure our participants know that you don't have to always say, I did this today and towards my goal. Sometimes some days you won't make progress, and we want to tell them that's part of it. So if you don't make progress, you're going to write down what is it that you think got in your way that day that didn't allow you to make progress. So we don't want our participants to repress or to feel the need to try and prove to themselves that they're moving forward in that way, but rather just to honestly record what they went through throughout the day and see what issues they need to resolve so they can keep moving towards that goal. And that's the more important idea that we were trying to get at. One of the great quotes by German philosopher Goethe is, it's not so much where we are as in which direction we are moving when it comes to achieving our life goals. And that's sort of the motto that's underlying our study for our participants, as for them to know if you're moving in the right direction, that's good enough. So we're not looking at a linear model where they're getting better every day. Rather, we're looking at a pattern in general, a trend they're going to adopt in their lives, where they're always moving forward. Any questions?
All right. Yeah, I think it now is the perfect time to open up for questions. I think that we've got, give or take, somewhere just around 10 minutes for questions for our presenters. So yes, question.
Question is, are they accounting for mental health? Instead of depression and anxiety, mental health with regards to the speech, I would argue that David Goggins provides for could lead to other areas besides depression and anxiety. So are they accounting for the mentorship that are offering? It looks like mentors, like practicing professionals, social workers, or like anything of that nature, to at least support those who are going to be studying.
Were you able to get that question? Because my memory is so bad, I don't think I'd be able to repeat it properly.
If you could ask the person asking the question, if they could reiterate the question, like a shorter version, because I lost some words at the beginning of the question.
No worries. Are you guys accounting for
Depression and anxiety, right?
outside of depression, anxiety? Are you
Outside of them, yeah.
recommend any like professional that will support regarding mental health, those who are going through it? Because David Goggins' speech sometimes, for some people, I would argue they can't handle that kind of speech. So, is that something that you guys are looking at?
Right. So if I understand it, you're concerned about those who are suffering, freshman students suffering from anxiety or depression, and the potential effects of listening to the less than 1 minute video every day with David Goggins for them. Did I get the essence of your question? Am I representing it properly?
Basically, yes.
Basically.
Yes. All right. We did consider that, which is partly why we also an idea that we wanted to incorporate at the beginning, rather than just the big five. We also wanted to use Beck's depression inventory, so we can get a clear idea if there are participants who could, as you stated, have issues or take with David Goggins' videos. So that way we can perhaps, if necessary, we can exclude them at the beginning from the study if that could cause an issue for them. But I think on the whole, and I've read a lot of what he's written, and I've seen a lot of interviews with him. And what's interesting for me is to hear from people who have listened to him regularly and consistently over the past 2 or 3 years. And it seems that from the letters that he's gotten, from the comments on his lectures and on his interviews, he's a force for good in that world, because he is coming from an environment that was very traumatic from his father and from his upbringing. His book is literally called "Can't Hurt Me," so it's about him overcoming that trauma and overcoming that hurt. And so we hope that his talks will not be triggering, but rather they will be inspiring. They will give people the motivation they need, because if they can see where he's at and where he is in his life and how he was able to transform his life in that way, that can provide them with a source of inspiration. He can be, for them, a beacon that they can also follow. I can do that as well. They can see what Nietzsche called the second self, the creation of the second self. They can see a second self for them that they want to pursue. Through his videos, they see a path to that. They see a real life testament how we can do that. So hopefully it will not cause that issue, but rather it will do the opposite. It would help some people be able to move forward in their lives in that regard.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So yeah, definitely. So I believe, like, in a way, like it's like when introduction from like the school, like getting into that transitional period, I feel like you would get introduced more into the prison and the juvenile aspect, like later on in adulthood. Like it's like a huge transitionary period.
Yeah.
So the question I was asked about my silent discussion was, what about the colored pencils, colored pens? And it's not like there's, for myself, a specific reason why I did that. I wanted the students to have some anonymity. And I guess if everyone wrote in pencil, you could, but I also felt like it helped to give voice. I let the kids choose what color pen or pencil they want. But they're just pens or pencils that I bought myself, and I let them select them themselves. So I think it just also aesthetically looks better. When I was doing research on this teaching strategy, they recommended, the problem is if you have, yesterday I had, I think 19 kids, well, then you're going to have 3 kids with a green pen. And I thought, oh, then it's not like everyone has their own color. So then one time I was like, oh, we'll have different types of these markers and pens. And then I realized it doesn't really matter. I just think it looks nice, but you could certainly just use one ink pen or one pencil or have it be uniform. Thank you.
I actually had a question for Shanice. I was really in grad school, the really only support structure that I had, being kind of a fish out of water in Louisiana, was my international colleagues, were my international colleagues. And so one of the important things to me was to make sure that I was always able to support them, right, as best as I could. So I know you just kind of did a pilot, right? But if you were to kind of share some kind of important closing thoughts, right, for this particular session, because we're running out of time, what can we do now in your limited with the limited data that you've got in your estimation to help them?
So I think the biggest thing, and that leads me into what I will be doing for my third study, is just the idea of cultural awareness was one of the biggest things that was recognized between all 3 of the participants. So as far as not just singling out towards students, but also thinking about like the faculty, the staff, and things of that nature. One of the things that was noted, and that I also recognize within the literature and from experience being an instructor here, is the idea that within higher education, we stress the idea of being inclusive and making sure we're using inclusive language, but not a lot of people understand as far as what does it mean to be culturally sensitive. So for me, what I am hoping to do, again, 3 studies, that was the first one. What I'm hoping to do in the third study is try and get a better understanding of what cultural sensitivity means as a way to implement cultural sensitivity workshops and clinics. So that's something that we can spread within college campuses. So for teachers, for students, for administrators, and for staff to be able to create a better environment and a learning environment for all students, not just international, because again, you don't have to be an international student to have diversity in a sense, but you spread inclusion just again by recognizing different cultures and being able to integrate and collaborate with them appropriately. If that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed our first session. I'm very excited to kind of see what happens in our sessions moving forward. Can I ask those who are present, just give all of our presenters a little bit of love with a round of applause, please. All right, give me just a couple of moments and I'll have everything set up for our next session.